Today, these kids are like other teenagers. They play computer games, study, and have time to practice meditation. But not long ago, they fought to survive on the streets, controlled by pimps who sold their services. Alyssa is 15. She was forced into prostitution by her sister and a pimp 1 year ago.
He forced me to turn tricks in the hotel room all day. I couldn't leave, I couldn't eat, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't talk to my family anymore.
An arrest led Alyssa to Children of the Night. The kids study at a private school on the group's site. They also get one-on-one counseling and together start to turn their lives around. Amber is 17 years old.
We're pretty much all the same, and we can look at each other and look up to each other and make sure that we're all doing well. We bond like a family here.
Many Americans have heard of sexual trafficking as far away in Asia, but in the United States, teenage runaways can become victims, says Los Angeles Police Department Vice Officer Sean King.
In looking for international trafficking crimes and victims, we often forget that there's hundreds or thousands of domestic trafficking victims right here in the city of Los Angeles, not counting other parts of the United States.
A media campaign is alerting Los Angeles residents to the problem. Recently, Children of the Night founder Lois Lee thanked community supporters who helped the organization, including those who work for local businesses and movie studios. She says volunteers and staff members have helped thousands of former prostitutes find productive work in society.
Some of them are professionals, some of them are teachers running inner city schools, some of them work in public relations, some of them work as executives in other corporations.
Lee says for many of the teens, the program is a haven where they can study, play, and just be normal teenagers. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
President Karzai met with U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta last month before these Washington talks, which are expected to include the breadth of U.S.-Afghan relations beyond next year's exit of most of the remaining 60,000 U.S. troops there. State Department spokeswoman Victoria Nuland.
I think we expect the full range of issues to come up, the issues of security, issues of political transition. As you know, there are elections scheduled in 2014 in Afghanistan, U.S. ongoing economic support, our Silk Road strategy, our regional integration strategy. So there's a lot to talk about when President Karzai comes, and we're all looking forward to having him in the U.S.
Taliban fighters continue to undermine security for the Karzai government, and they still control large parts of the country, especially along the border with Pakistan. Cato Institute analyst Malu Innocent says U.S. President Barack Obama's second term is a chance to change the U.S. approach to Afghanistan.
To begin working with the Taliban and sort of incorporating it within the government, sort of accepting the realities on the ground and understanding that the Taliban, with their sort of local lay of the land, their understanding of the human terrain, their cross-border sanctuaries that they have in Pakistan, understanding and coming to reconcile our interests and our limited ability to sort of change that situation.
Afghanistan and Pakistan are cooperating on the release of some Taliban prisoners as part of an effort to win over more moderate elements in the group. Afghan government spokesman Aymal Faizi.
We hope the release of these Taliban prisoners will help the peace process in Afghanistan and encourage other Taliban to negotiate with the Afghan government.
State Department spokeswoman Nuland says it's a good start.
This needs to be done in a manner that encourages the best possible path forward, a renunciation of violence, acceptance of the Afghan constitution, etc. But we are very supportive of dialogue between Afghanistan and Pakistan that can support reconciliation.
Middle East Institute professor Marvin Weinbaum says there's a greater push for that reconciliation after more than a decade of combat.
It would be nice to have a political outcome here, because that would give us a better sense that when we left in 2014, that things would not come apart.
The Obama administration says it will maintain an enduring security presence in Afghanistan beyond 2014, including training and support for counterterrorism. Scott Stearns, VOA News, the State Department.
A new round of sanctions targeting Iran's energy and shipping sectors. They build on a range of unilateral and multilateral sanctions against Iranian industry and banks. The measures are aimed at curbing Iran's nuclear program. The West claims Iran is trying to build nuclear weapons. Tehran says the program is for civilian purposes. Iran has indicated it is ready to hold a fresh round of talks with international powers, the so-called P5+1, the United States, Britain, Russia, China and France, plus Germany. Jamie Ingram of IHS Global Insight says the sanctions are forcing Iran to the negotiating table.
This is hitting the Iranians hard in the pocket. Also, with the restrictions on imports, there's growing food shortages.
EU trade with Iran, even in permitted commodities, has fallen off dramatically in recent months. That's because European banks fear the wrath of the US, says Nigel Kushner, chief executive of W Legal, which advises firms on trading with Iran.
The Americans will have a quiet word with them, one suspects, and asks them not to do it. So they won't do it even though they are permitted to do it. And I was speaking yesterday with a Swiss bank who have said, you know, we want to accept payments for medical goods or humanitarian goods that are going to Iran, but we're too scared to do it.
Kushner says Iran is looking to countries beyond the jurisdiction of the sanctions to get what it needs.
It might take longer, it might be more cumbersome, and it might cost them more, but they will often look to countries like China, possibly Turkey, who don't need to comply.
The banking sanctions are causing the most pain in Iran, says analyst Ali Fatollah-Nejad of the University of London.
You have huge financial and banking sanctions, which is the eye of the storm, from which every other, also civilian branches of the economy are then crippled.
Fatollah-Nejad argues the West must put the sanctions up for negotiation at any upcoming talks if a diplomatic solution is to be found.
Iran is a country, in terms of its economic development, in terms of the well-being of its population, in terms of the well-being of its civil society, is something that Iranians inside and outside the country do care a lot about. And this is something that has to be put on the table.
If the talks go ahead, they would be the latest in a long series. Analysts expect a focus on short-term confidence building rather than a solution to the crisis. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Jack Lew began his career as a legislative aide in 1973 and later held key budget positions with Presidents Obama and Clinton. He also worked as an investment banker. Lew has a reputation as a tough negotiator with a keen understanding of the details of the immense U.S. budget. That reputation is likely to be tested in the coming months as Congress and the White House battle over the federal budget and a rapidly expanding debt.
I, Timothy F. Geithner.
4 years ago, when U.S. Central Bank official Timothy Geithner was sworn in as Treasury Secretary, unemployment was rising and the stock and housing markets were in danger of collapse. Geithner helped the departing Bush administration and the new Obama administration use $700 billion to prop up tottering financial firms in a bid to reassure investors, businesses, and consumers. Despite much criticism, economist Desmond Lockman at the American Enterprise Institute says the program worked.
The country really was facing a huge crisis. Many people thought that we could quite easily tip into a depression. He managed to stabilize that situation.
But Lockman and other critics say Geithner did too little to improve the day-to-day growth of the economy.
He favored Wall Street on far too many occasions at the expense of Main Street.
Sarah Anderson at the Institute for Policy Studies hopes for a new approach at the Treasury Department.
Three important things to look for in the next Treasury Secretary are they going to be more aggressive in reining in Wall Street? Are they going to do more to help homeowners facing foreclosure? And are they going to be a deficit hawk, or are they going to try to get our economy back fully on its feet before they address the deficit?
The coming 2 months will be a test for Lew as the battle over the budget deficit heats up in Congress. Although stock markets, housing, and the banking industry have stabilized, economists warn the U.S. economy remains fragile. Without a budget deal in Congress, many say the U.S. recovery could stall. Millar Sega, VOA News.
Massachusetts is one of 41 U.S. states now reporting widespread cases of influenza. Tom Mamino is the mayor of Boston, the state's biggest city.
I am declaring a public health emergency in the city of Boston. The latest reports show an increasingly tough flu season.
A hospital in eastern Pennsylvania set up a special tent outside the emergency room to deal with the wave of flu patients. Several hospitals in Chicago have had to turn patients away and send them to other hospitals in the area. Dr. Mark Siegel of George Washington University Hospital in Washington says seasonal influenza is an international phenomenon. It usually breaks out in the coldest season of the year.
And it generally moves through Eastern Europe and then Western Europe and then kind of spreads westward towards the United States. Now with international travel, we often see it spread everywhere much quicker.
Dr. Siegel describes the typical symptoms of flu.
So influenza generally gives you a muscle aches, headache, high fevers, and can be associated with sore throat, runny nose, cough. But any number of other viruses can give you similar symptoms that might not be quite as severe.
Horrible sore throat and ears.
Just makes you feel bad for 5 or 7 days. It's nasty.
Doctors say if flu symptoms are severe, such as shortness of breath, patients should see a doctor. And they recommend a flu vaccination as the best protection against the illness. Doctors warn that small children and the elderly are the most vulnerable to serious complications from the flu. This 6-year-old girl from Dallas died just hours after her grandparents took her to the emergency room with flu-like symptoms, and she was seen and released. Valletta Johnson is her grandmother.
They looked down her throat, checked her ears. Vitals was all good, said that she had the flu.
Doctors say they do not know if this unusually early flu season has peaked yet or if this year's outbreak will get worse. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
Is a big deal here at the Tufts Medical Center emergency room. Nurse Sandy Gibbons says they've seen a surge of flu patients in the last couple weeks.
And it came on very fast. That's what we've noticed. It went from being a trickle to inundated within a matter of 2 to 3 days.
Hospitals are inundated across Boston.
See how our bed flow is doing.
Influenza cases are up more than 10-fold from last year's mild season.
You hanging in there? Okay, need anything?
And that's a challenge for hospitals that are already nearly full, says Dr. David Hooper at Massachusetts General Hospital.
The surge in influenza patients since early December has really added a lot more pressure on managing beds and making sure that everyone gets the care they need.
But while 47 of the 50 U.S. states are reporting widespread flu activity, the response from Boston Mayor Thomas Menino is so far unique.
I am declaring a public health emergency in the city of Boston.
The city is offering free flu shots at clinics across the city and urging everyone to get vaccinated. The emergency declaration is a welcome but unexpected move, says Dr. Hooper.
Some would call it an emergency. Others would call it a challenging year that we've got to, step to the next level on.
City officials say the point is to raise the urgency level for people to get vaccinated. Early figures show only about 35% had as of November.
Deep breath here. 1, 2, 3. Ooh, okay.
The mayor's announcement got Leona Hampton's attention.
Oh, I got really nervous, and my doctors had talked to me previously about getting the flu shot, but I was a little leery. I'm like, oh, I don't ever get the flu, but then I need to change my thinking.
Changing people's thinking is not easy. Dental student McKenna Cox is getting over the flu. She did not get vaccinated, and she does not plan to next year because, like many people, she says it's not that big a deal.
I think it's kind of crazy, the whole manic panic about the whole thing. This is New England in the winter. People get sick.
But as they struggle to find empty beds in Boston's emergency rooms, doctors disagree. Steve Baragona, VOA News, Boston.
They get the flu from the flu shot, and in fact they've been probably exposed. Okay. All right. Any questions?
All the pins represent the people that are reporting the system. Every pin is a zip code.
Boston Children's Hospital epidemiologist John Brownstein is literally pinning down where the flu outbreak is occurring. The sea of pins on his virtual U.S. map represents the nationwide network of volunteers for his website, Flew Near You.
The idea is getting people with a small amount of time each week to just tell us how they're feeling.
A short weekly email survey asks each person about his or her health. In just a few months, Flew Near You has recruited 40,000 volunteers and keeps growing.
So we say putting the public back in public health.
Hospitals and doctors' offices were seeing rising numbers of flu cases in late December, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC. But Brownstein says he is ahead of the curve.
And Flew Near You is showing that we already peaked and are heading down. And in fact, the latest numbers that are coming out from the CDC actually agree that this has already come down.
Brownstein plans to take the system global and expand it to other diseases. He currently runs another website, HealthMap, that for 7 years has tracked outbreaks worldwide. He says as a graduate student, he grew weary of begging health ministers for information.
And so we had this idea of, well, what if we mine the web looking for clues about outbreaks via news, social media, blogs, chat rooms, discussion forums.
In Haiti's deadly 2010 cholera outbreak, HealthMap's automated web searches provided early information on the trajectory of the disease. Today, he is following an Ebola outbreak in Uganda.
We think there's opportunities to really track emerging infectious diseases with these tools.
Tools that pinpoint where diseases are occurring now. Steve Baragona, VOA News, Boston.
There we go. Beautiful.
The Mekong River, since ancient times, has served as a major transport route. Now, with modern ships and new ports, the river is becoming a key part of China's rapid economic expansion. Since 2004, annual cargo volumes have tripled between Thai and Chinese ports to about 300,000 tons, partly a result of a 2003 free trade agreement between China and its Asian neighbors. The booming trade is also due in part to a special early harvest program between Thailand and China that charges no tariffs on more than 100 farm products. Local vendors are not happy with the increased competition.
The Chinese produce is cheaper than Thai products, so it impacts the Thai farmers. They cannot sell their own vegetables.
Many here feel the tariff system is tilted against them. China's stricter food hygiene controls and a goods and service tax cut into profits for Thai exporters. But one of the biggest complaints is the transportation network itself. Saya Kamnun is an economist who studies the impact of dams on river communities.
All the boats belong to the Chinese, and they control the shipping costs and any extra expenses. And because the Chinese have built many dams upstream, they can control the water level, so more boats from China can export more produce downstream.
In the Thai border town of Chiang Saen, signs of a changing demographics are hard to miss. At local markets, imported Chinese produce sells quickly as buyers scoop up bargains. But many here still support homegrown producers.
Thais prefer to eat their own crops, such as chili and other vegetables. So the Chinese produce ends up being shipped to Bangkok.
Despite the local grumbling, Chinese imports are poised to increase with a newly opened second commercial port. Weary Jinakorn is the port manager.
The main reason we built the new port was because in the future they will have more produce from China. The old Chiang Saen port received 300,000 tons per year. That's the reason the Thai Port Authority decided to build a new one that could handle up to 6 million tons per year.
While trade steams ahead, Thai critics of the deal worry that unless the government steps in, local businesses will suffer as profits head upriver. Steve Sanford reporting for VOA News from Chiang Saen, Thailand.